when I tell you this is my 5th time recording this video. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cases Never Closed podcast. If you're new, hello, welcome. I am Keisha, the creator of this podcast and channel. Feel free to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell next to the subscribe button so I get notifications so you get notifications anytime I post or upload a video. That's how my day is going. I just wanted to say I'm very sorry for being absent. I don't know if you can tell, I am getting over a sinus infection. But we are on the right track. We are getting back to schedule, doing what we normally do. Hopefully we are good to go. So, the first thing I wanted to say is thank you guys so much for all of the love and support you have shown. It's very, very greatly appreciated. The Madeleine McCann story had gotten 177 views, and the Lizzie Borden case had gotten 106 views. Someone had reached out to me about the Lizzie Borden case and said that there were a lot of things that I had left out with that case. And I realized that obviously that was true. And the reason for that is because there were a lot of different stories and information and videos and just all this different stuff. So it was kind of hard to get everything into that one video. But I do always tell you guys to feel free to go and, research that story yourself. So do that, please, because I didn't realize how much I had actually left out. But as far as the Madeleine McCann story goes, there is a lot of new information coming out about that story. And that is the one video I have done that's gotten a ton of views. So let me know if you guys would want me to do a follow-up video on that case and just update you guys on everything that's going on. And as always, with that being said, feel free to go in the comments and let me know what kind of videos you guys want to see me do next. As always, it can be about a solved or unsolved case. It can be about a new case, a cold case, or like the Lizzie Borden case, it can be about a haunted or abandoned place. As always, I do try to get to every single one of your guys' video ideas. So let me know what you guys want to see me do. So this video is going to be extremely long. So just prepare yourself, because I don't know how much is going to get said or how long this video is actually going to be or how many times I'm going to get interrupted. This is my 5th time restarting this video. So with this video, there is a trigger warning. There are mentions of rape, cannibalism, kidnapping, murder, and self-harm. All of this does have to do with children. So if that's something that is going to upset you or offend you in any way, please, please skip this video. So today's story is on Albert Fish. His whole name being Hamilton Howard Albert Fish. He was an American serial killer, rapist, child molester, and cannibal. He has committed at least 3 child murders from July 1924 to June 1928. He is also known as the Gray Man, Werewolf of Wisteria, Brooklyn Vampire, Moon Maniac, and Boogeyman. He was apprehended on December 13th, 1934, and put on trial for the kidnapping and murder of Grace Budd. He was convicted and executed by electric chair on January 16th, 1936, at the age of 65. Albert was born in Washington, D.C. on May 19th, 1870 to Randall and Ellen Fish. His family had a history of mental illness. He had an uncle with mania. One of his brothers was in a mental hospital. His sister was diagnosed with mental affliction, and his mother had hallucinations. There were also 3 other relatives who had also had mental illnesses. He was put in St. John's Orphanage in Washington at a very young age, and while he was there, he was physically abused. It is said that throughout his life, he had written obscene letters to women. I tried to find the letters that he had written, and there was one letter that I did find. I did save it to my phone, and I will be able to read it to you guys. He had moved to New York in 1890 at the age of 20, where he had engaged in male prostitution and began molesting and raping boys. He was arrested in 1903 for grand larceny. He was convicted and incarcerated in Sing Sing. In 1910, while he was working in Wilmington, Delaware, he had met 19-year-old Thomas Keaton. 10 days into his relationship with Thomas, he had taken him to an old farmhouse where he tortured him for over a period of 2 weeks. It was later said that he had originally intended to kill Thomas, cut up his body, and take it home. But he feared that the hot weather would draw attention to him. So instead of doing that, he decided to pour peroxide over the wound, wrap it in a Vaseline-covered handkerchief, leave $10, kiss Thomas goodbye, and left. In 1917, he began to indulge in self-harm by embedding needles into his groin and abdomen. After he was arrested, there were x-rays that had revealed at least 29 needles lodged in his pelvic region. I'm no expert on the body, and I'm not one to tell people what to do. But I want to know how you manage to get 29 needles into your pelvic region. I hate shots. Like, I'm fine with piercings and I'm fine with tattoos, but I hate needles. I hate getting shots. I just hate it all. And I could never put 29 needles into me. Like, I couldn't even tell you the first step into putting 29 needles into you. But anyway, Albert had said that he mainly chose people who were either mentally disabled or African American for his victims. He had later explained that the reason that he chose these people were because he assumed that these people wouldn't be missed. He then went on to say that he tortured, mutilated, and murdered his victims with, and I quote, his implements of hell. He had said that his implements that he had used were a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a handsaw. So now is where it gets kind of crazy. And this is where the whole note comes into place. On May 25th, 1928, Albert had seen a classified advertisement in the Sunday edition of New York World saying a young man, 18, wishes position in country, Edward Budd. On May 28th, at the age of 58, Albert had visited the Budd family under the pretense of hiring Edward. He had confessed to planning on tying up Edward, mutilating him, and leaving him to bleed. He did promise to hire Bud and his friend, saying that he would send for them in a few days. He failed to show up to send for them, but he did return later, meeting Edward's sister, Grace. When he had met Grace, he had made up a story saying that he had a birthday party he had to attend for his niece. And he had convinced the parents to allow him to take Grace to his niece's birthday party. Obviously, the parents said yes. Albert had taken Grace to an abandoned house he had previously picked to use for his next victim, Wisteria Cottage. This is where he had murdered and eaten the girl. Every time I talk about, it's a lot. It's a lot to process. And it gets worse. I hate to tell you, but it gets worse. On November 1934, an anonymous letter was written and sent to Grace's parents. This letter is what had led the police to Fish. And this is what the letter stated. My dear Miss Budd, in 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco to Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At the time, there was a famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold to the butchers to be cut up and sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body, and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price. John stayed there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11, took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night he spanked them, tortured them, to make their meat good and tender. First, he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest behind and, of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven. All of his behind was boiled, broiled, fried, and stewed. The little boy was next, went the same way. At the time, I was living at, it gives an address, right side. He told me so often how good human flesh was, I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street. Brought you pot cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her, on the pretense of taking her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked up wild flowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I didn't, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook, and eat it. How sweet and tender her little behind was, roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not mess with her sexually, though. I could have, had I wished. She died a virgin. Wow. Wow. That was my first time reading that. Wow. I feel like I should have read that before I put it in the video. Wow. So, the police had investigated the letter, and they had said that the part of the letter concerning murder of Grace was found to be accurate in its description of kidnapping. They did say it was impossible to confirm whether or not Fish had actually eaten parts of the body. They had said that the envelope that the letter was delivered in had a small hexagonal emblem with the letters NYPCBA. It had represented the New York Private Chauffeur Benevolent Association. A janitor for that company had told the police that he had taken some stationery home and he had left it at his rooming house when he had moved out. The landlady of the rooming house had said that Fish had checked out a few days earlier. William F. King, the chief investigator, had waited outside of the house until Fish had returned. Fish was taken in to headquarters for questioning, and he had made no attempt to deny the murder of Grace. So the trial for the murder of Grace Budd began on March 11th, 1935 in White Plains, New York. The trial had lasted 10 days. Fish pleaded insanity and claimed to have heard voices from God telling him to kill children. Fish's lawyer, James Dempsey, noted in a summation that Fish was a psychiatric phenomenon. The defense chief expert witness, Frederick Wortham, said that Fish believed similarly sacrificing a boy would be penance for his own sin, and even if the act itself was wrong, angels would prevent it if God didn't approve. Wortham detailed Fish's cannibalism, which in his mind he associated with communion. The last question that Dempsey had asked Wortham was how the doctor considered his mental condition based on his life. Wortham simply answered, "He's insane." So none of the jurors had doubted that Fish was insane, but they felt he should be executed anyway. Fish was found to be sane and guilty. He was sentenced to death by electrocution. He was executed on January 16th, 1936. He had entered the chamber at 11:06 p.m., and he was pronounced dead 3 minutes later. He was buried in the Sing Sing prison cemetery. So, that was a lot. And obviously I did not expect half of that to happen. So I am just going to leave that there and leave you guys to tell me what your guys' thoughts were on this story. But as always, you know, feel free to let me know what your guys' thoughts were, or what you feel about this case, and let me know what cases you guys want to hear me do in the future. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this video, and I hope all of you guys have an amazing weekend.